Good morning, evening, or night, wherever you are. Welcome to WHAM today. Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and let's drift through the whispers of today's world, one quiet thought at a time. As we wrap up Monday, 16th June 2025, let's see what stories are unfolding around us. China's economic performance is a study in contrasts, with retail sales climbing even as factory output decelerates. A situation exacerbated by tariffs levied by the United States. Despite robust consumer spending, new home prices in major Chinese cities are experiencing a two-year slide. In response to trade pressures, China is strategically employing its rare earth element resources. Financial institutions' exposure to China has decreased to an all-time low. Coal production at China Coal Energy increased in May, although sales decreased. Stock indices are being recalibrated to include more technology firms, signaling an economic pivot. Morgan Stanley forecasts the robotics market in China will reach $108 billion by 2028, capturing 40% of the global market. Baidu is aggressively hiring AI professionals to bolster its artificial intelligence capabilities. Shanghai Yuxing is moving to liquidate electric vehicle manufacturer Hosen due to financial strain amid fierce competition. TP-Link, a Chinese router manufacturer, has executed significant layoffs at its Shanghai chip development unit. Lianlian Global, headquartered in Hong Kong, is leveraging its expansion in the Middle East to facilitate payments for semis trading with Chinese suppliers. If Beihai, coconut water company, is pursuing a Hong Kong IPO, anticipating benefits from its proximity to mainland China for global expansion. Sohu.com CEO Charles Zhang Taoyang advises students to gain practical company experience before pursuing graduate studies or launching startups. It is reported that President Trump's tariffs are causing a surge of Chinese goods into Southeast Asia, Europe, and Latin America. Turning to Taiwan. Amidst trade tensions with both China and the United States, the Commerce Ministry has added Chinese chip makers Huawei Technologies and SMIC to its export control list, mirroring U.S. trade restrictions. Taiwan is also focusing on blood bag production amidst increasing pressure from China. Further, Taiwan is putting companies behind China's AI ambitions on the export control list. In the United States, the tariff wars with China are affecting local amusement parks. Meanwhile, in Nigeria, the Nigerian Exchange Group and Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, are enhancing capital market collaborations with China to encourage cross-border investment. Over in Saudi Arabia, Promedex and China's Shenda are exploring opportunities for medical supplies production within the kingdom. Finally, in Southeast Asia, Bob Herrera Lim of Teneo suggests economic ties are key in Europe's efforts to woo the region, but it may not win it over the US or China. Israel's ongoing conflict with Iran is sending ripples through global markets, most notably in energy and finance sectors. Attacks aimed at crippling Iran's energy infrastructure, specifically targeting oil and gas facilities, have sparked fears among investors, anticipating oil market volatility and rising energy prices. Smoke plumes were seen rising from a southern Tehran oil refinery following an Israeli strike. Global supply chains are already feeling the pinch, with predictions of increased global inflation. Crude oil prices are rebounding, with MEX crude nearing $6,200 per barrel, propelled by the escalating tensions. However, a tempering of oil prices combined with hopes of conflict containment has led to stock market gains. Initial stock market surges and oil price retreats were seen on news of Iran's ceasefire desires. Despite rising global equity markets, some strategists urge caution. The conflict is shaping stock market strategies, with investors displaying cautious optimism despite valuation concerns. Small and mid-cap stocks may be overheated. Gold rates have dipped due to profit booking, as market focus shifts to the conflict and upcoming US Federal Reserve policy decisions. Anticipated selling pressure on 10-year US Treasuries is expected to have lasting effects, drawing parallels to past clashes. The Nifty 50 index is expected to remain relatively stable as investors await the US Federal Reserve's commentary post-rate announcement. Asia-Pacific markets have largely declined as investors assess the situation, while the Bank of Japan has held its rate at 0.5%. Gulf stock markets initially plummeted amid the escalation, but later recovered, highlighting the volatility and uncertainty surrounding the conflict's economic ramifications. The United States is bracing for potential increases in gas prices, possibly as high as 20 cents a gallon, due to strikes on Iranian oil refineries. France's decision to close stands of some Israeli defense firms at the Paris Air Show has drawn strong condemnation from Israel, which called the move unprecedented. Saudi Arabia is making significant strides in its economic diversification and sustainability efforts. AviLease, a Saudi leasing company, has committed to purchasing up to 77 Airbus aircraft worth $17 billion at the Paris Air Show. This includes 40 confirmed orders and options for 37 more. NEOM, Enwa, and VCM have partnered on a deal involving 30 million tons of carbon credits, furthering the nation's net zero goals. To fund new ventures, Saudi Electricity is pursuing a $1 billion loan. The Tadawul all-share stock market saw a positive close, rising by 1.26%. Power Metallic has been granted the Jabal Badin exploration license within the Jabal Sayid Belt. Recent regulations now require mandatory hotel bookings for Umrah visa approvals. The digital wallet Titmo is partnering with MoneyGram to expand its services. Tashil has introduced Now Access, a new solution for wage processing. Madinet Nasser and Wahaj are considering a joint business venture. Saudi Arabia currently holds the top position in Gulf exports, transiting the Strait of Hormuz. To advance financial innovation, Taiwan is working with Astrolabs. Across the Gulf region, stock markets in the UAE and Saudi Arabia are showing signs of recovery, with EMA and Union Properties leading the gains. Russia is facing increasing international scrutiny and economic challenges. The United States has reportedly cancelled upcoming talks aimed at easing tensions between the two nations. The AU is considering banning new Russian gas contracts using trade law mechanism. 7 leaders indicated that future sanctions will hinge on Russia's demonstration of good faith efforts in peace negotiation. Gazprom reported a $13.10 billion loss for 2024. Oil freight rates from Russia to India are easing, but proposed restrictions could reverse this. Boeing offices in Kyiv sustained damage from a Russian airstrike. Russia has reportedly transferred the bodies of over 6,000 soldiers to Ukraine. Russia fears that Israel's conflict with Iran could lead to the loss of another ally in the region. Russia's alleged use of U.S. banks to circumvent sanctions by funneling billions of dollars to Turkey has come under scrutiny, according to a Wall Street Journal report. Satellite production assembly lines have been launched. The Russian stock market, MOEX, is under observation, with updates on share prices across finance, transportation, metallurgy, and mining. Moldovan President Sandu has warned that Russia may instigate a crisis in Transnistria, leading up to Moldova's election. Ukraine continues to grapple with the ongoing conflict with Russia, which has resulted in damage to civilian infrastructure, including Boeing offices in Kyiv. President Zelensky has announced new sanctions targeting the Russian financial sector. Russia has reportedly transferred the bodies of over 6,000 soldiers to Ukraine. The escalating tensions between Israel and Iran are causing ripple effects in international relations. Russia fears that this conflict could lead to the loss of another ally in the Middle East. The broader relationship between Russia, the Arab Muslim world, and the Israel-Iran conflict is under analysis. Moldova is facing potential political instability, with President Sandu warning that Russia may provoke a crisis in Transnistria ahead of the country's elections. India is currently navigating a complex economic landscape with mixed signals. The gift nifty suggests a possibly weak start for the Indian stock market. Simultaneously, the energy sector is pressured by increasing oil prices, which could affect the financial performance of companies like ONEC and Oil India. The Reserve Bank of India, RBI, is actively gathering market insights on borrowing costs following recent debt sell-offs. The RBI is also addressing concerns related to bank fraud, advocating for practical solutions. Despite global economic pressures, India's trade deficit decreased in May. The equity markets rebounded after 2 days of losses, boosted by gains in the IT and financial sectors. The Sensex rose by 677.55 points, and the Nifty 50 increased by 0.92%. Axis Cades experienced a 5% surge in its stock value after announcing a production-boosting agreement. The Tata Group, which acquired Air India in 2022 for $350, is still working to improve the airline's image. Turning to India's international relations, India and Cyprus are deepening their cooperation on both defense and economic fronts. Prime Minister Modi is prioritizing a $100 billion infrastructure initiative as part of the India-Cyprus partnership. Cooperation between the stock exchanges of India and Cyprus is being strengthened. Defense ties are also expected to grow through increased industrial collaboration. In the United States, millions of Americans are seeing their credit scores decline as student loan collections resume. The U.S. is engaged in fierce supply chain competition with China, potentially benefiting countries such as Malaysia, Vietnam, Mexico, Turkey, Thailand, Indonesia, India, and Brazil. Tinder has reintroduced its double dating feature in the U.S. after its initial attempt in 2016 failed to gain traction. EPO shares in the U.S. are experiencing first-day gains at a rate not seen since 2021, marking a strong resurgence in the IPO market. Our stocks have largely closed higher, especially amidst the Israel-Iran conflict, with the Nasdaq Composite increasing by 1% and the Dow Jones Industrial Average rising over 300 points. This recovery comes after a volatile period, with oil prices fluctuating based on geopolitical developments, including signs of Iran's openness to a ceasefire and nuclear talk. Arctis has entered the U.S. defense sector with a strategic rollout of its NC Protect Data Security solution. The U.S. has stated it will not support the G7's initiative for de-escalation with Iran. Iran. Oil prices initially surged after former U.S. President Donald Trump's comments suggesting the evacuation of Tehran, but these gains were later tempered by signals from Iran indicating a willingness to engage in ceasefire discussions and nuclear negotiation. Ukraine. With the U.S. reducing its aid to Ukraine, European nations, especially the Nordic countries and the UK, have significantly increased their support to fill the funding gap. Japan is attracting increased investment from global private equity firms like Bain Capital and KKR. SoftBank secured $4.80 billion by selling 21.5 million T-Mobile shares at $224 apiece. Citing looming growth risks, the Bank of Japan, BOE, will slow cuts to government bond purchases from April next year. This decision caused a dip in Japan bond futures. Despite the BOE's move, an ongoing Middle East conflict, Japan's Nikkei stock average rose, supported by gains on Wall Street, with Advantest experiencing a notable surge. The Nikkei has largely disregarded the BOE's decision, mirroring Wall Street's positive trend. Japan is also expanding arms exports to address security concerns. Orico plans to accelerate the restructuring of its Thai and Indonesian businesses. The U.S. government has approved Nippon's acquisition of U.S. Steel, retaining a golden share in the company. Meanwhile, in Australia, AZCD is under government scrutiny amid changes in the Australian share market. The escalating tensions between Iran and Israel have sent ripples through global markets, creating a volatile economic landscape. Despite initial surges in oil shipping rates for Middle Eastern routes as vessel offerings paused, oil prices have largely decreased, following reports suggesting Iran aims to de-escalate the conflict, which in turn has boosted stock markets. The G7 leaders have strongly denounced Iran for fueling instability and terror in the Middle East and have called for de-escalation. Meanwhile, in Russia, there are signs of a potential distancing from Iran amid the ongoing crisis. Turning to Canada, the conflict has sparked increased interest in oil ETFs, notably among Canadian investment funds. The FTSE 100 closed near a record high, reflecting the complex market reactions to the geopolitical uncertainty. Baker Hughes CEO Lorenzo Simonelli has warned against prematurely forecasting oil prices, pointing out the risk of a substantial price increase if tensions escalate further. Despite this, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange has demonstrated resilience, climbing for the second day in a row. Some analysts expressed concern that markets are exhibiting dangerously complacent behavior, given the inherent risks of further escalation in the region. The United Kingdom has solidified a trade agreement with the United States under the leadership of President Donald Trump and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, although lingering disagreements about steel imports persist. Despite Chancellor Rachel Reeves' attempts to reassure the public, economists predict that unpopular tax increases are now unavoidable. In the financial sector, Citi banker Peel Hunt is grappling with increased losses, primarily due to a lack of activity in the UK stock market. The housing market is also feeling the pressure, with house prices falling as sellers lower their expectations. Expanding its global footprint, Nayawani, a UK-based fintech platform, is now operating in the Saudi market. Meanwhile, Ukraine has received an initial installment of $1 billion from the U.S., funded by profits from frozen Russian assets. President Zelensky reported that Ukrainian forces have successfully stopped the Russian advance in the Sumy region. In Switzerland, the government has adjusted its economic growth projections downward for both 2025 and 2026, reflecting concerns about the global economic outlook. Shifting focus to Saudi Arabia, the UK's Nayawani has launched its fintech platform, marking its entry into the kingdom's burgeoning financial technology sector. South Korea's stock market achieved a significant milestone, exceeding a $2 trillion valuation. This surge was largely driven by the strength of the chip sector, pushing shares to a 3.5-year peak. To bolster economic growth, the government is preparing a second supplementary budget for the year. Politically, the opposition party chose Song Eun-seok as its new floor leader. Skylo is broadening its satellite service offerings in South Korea through strategic alliances with local telecommunications providers. Furthermore, Amazon and S Group are joining forces to develop an artificial intelligence data center within the nation. A dedicated government task force has been assembled to navigate forthcoming trade discussions with the United States. A concerning trend is the impact of mental health on workplace productivity, with approximately half of South Korean workers reporting symptoms of depression and anxiety. In investment decisions, Ørsted has signaled a preference for increasing its investments in Taiwan and South Korea, instead of exploring new markets elsewhere in Asia. Europe witnessed significant financial and technological developments. Vantage Data Centers successfully launched Europe's first euro-denominated bond deal, raising $820 million and creating a new asset class. SemiDrive, a Chinese automotive chip company, is set to supply cockpit system-on-a-chip technology to a European automaker for sedans and SUVs in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Market activity in Europe was marked by volatility, as stock markets recovered from a 5-day slump amid geopolitical tensions between Israel and Iran. However, Renault shares dipped by 6%. CBO posits that European single-stock options would be improved via interoperability. Australia is currently seeing its main stock exchange, the ASX, under scrutiny from the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, ASIC. This investigation stems from widespread concerns and identified serious failures in governance and risk management. Unspecified issues have triggered the probe, casting doubts on the exchange's operational resilience. Despite this inquiry and the escalating conflict in the Middle East, Australian shares have demonstrated relative stability, showing resilience in the face of both domestic and international uncertainty. United States. The United States saw President Biden and former President Trump agreeing to 2 televised debates in June and September. The debates will be hosted by CNN and ABC. The U.S. House passed a bill to sanction the International Criminal Court for seeking arrest warrants for Israeli officials. The U.S. economy showed resilience with jobless claims falling to 215,000, below expectations. China's economic activity indicated a mixed picture. Industrial profits rose 4.3% year-on-year, signaling some recovery in the manufacturing sector. Tensions remained high as China conducted military drills around Taiwan following Taiwan's presidential inauguration. These actions raised concerns internationally. Russia experienced escalating tensions with NATO countries. Russia accused NATO countries of inciting Ukraine to strike Russian territory with Western weapons. Russia continued its military operations in Ukraine, focusing on consolidating gains in the eastern regions. Ukraine faced continued military pressure from Russia, with intense fighting reported in the Donbas region. Ukraine's calls for increased military aid from Western allies intensified. The Ukrainian government worked to shore up its defenses and stabilize the economy amid ongoing conflict. Israel faced increased international scrutiny after the International Criminal Court sought arrest warrants for Israeli officials. This led to strong reactions from Israel and its allies. Domestically, political tensions remain high amid ongoing debates over the handling of the conflict in Gaza. Taiwan faced heightened military pressure from China, with China conducting military drills around the island. Taiwan's government condemned these actions as provocative. Taiwan sought stronger international support to maintain its security and stability. South Africa is grappling with the fallout from budget cuts initiated by the Trump administration, creating obstacles for its medical research sector and potentially slowing down global progress in combating diseases. Simultaneously, South Africa is strengthening its economic ties with China, expanding its agricultural exports to meet growing demand. However, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange has suffered a significant setback, with a $3.70 billion outflow triggered by foreign investor sell-offs. Turning to the United States, the Trump administration's fiscal policies are having ripple effects internationally, as evidenced by the difficulties faced by medical research institutions in South Africa. Moreover, President Trump's statements concerning Tehran are contributing to volatility and uncertainty in Asian stock markets, influencing investor sentiment and trading patterns. Pakistan has affirmed the adequacy of its fuel reserves and pledged to maintain vigilance in light of ongoing Middle Eastern tensions. In economic news, Fuji Fertilizer, a company with ties to the Pakistani military, intends to submit a bid for a stake in Pakistan International Airlines, PIA. Asia's stock markets presented a mixed picture. influenced by rising tensions between Israel and Iran and the upcoming Bank of Japan BOI meeting. Meanwhile, Asian shares saw gains alongside a surge in oil prices spurred by the geopolitical crisis. Reliance Industries sold 8.5 million shares of Asian Paints for Rs 1876 crore. The United States has also reportedly asked Vietnam to decrease its dependence on Chinese technology in its export product. The Indonesia stock market may see gains on Tuesday. Turning to the United States, business lobbyists are lobbying against a proposed $100 billion tax targeting foreign companies operating within the country. Furthermore, former President Trump's trade and tax policies are seen as impeding the U.S. battery industry's growth due to tariffs and potential reversals of tax credits. In Nigeria, gasoline retailers are expressing apprehension about the potential for a monopoly by the Dangote Refinery. Concurrently, efforts are in progress to bolster financial ties between Nigeria and China, facilitated by the NGX Group and the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. The Nigerian stock market is currently exhibiting volatility near its peak, though rising oil prices are providing some support. Separating from Ant Group, Ant International has released its first sustainability report, underlining its independent operations and the potential for a future listing. In France, affluent individuals are taking precautionary measures to protect their assets, looking ahead to the 2027 election. Concurrently, S4, a French telecommunications provider, has initiated an investigation into a recent disruption of its mobile network. Switzerland has revised its economic forecast downward for 2025, expressing concerns about the possible repercussions of a trade war. There are also worries that Switzerland might be repeating housing-related errors seen previously in England. The Financial Express in Bangladesh emphasized the energy partnership between Bangladesh and Russia during the Russia Day festivities in Dhaka. Contrasting fortunes are seen in Egypt and Israel, where Egypt's stock market is undergoing substantial losses, driving declines across the Middle East amid ongoing strikes, while Israel's market is indicating signs of recovery. In Spain, specifically Barcelona, water guns have emerged as a symbol of protests against tourism. Finally, Hungary has issued $4 billion in bonds to tackle budget shortfalls. And that's a wrap for today's news, because even headlines need a nap. Stay curious, stay kind, and let the noise fade as you find your quiet. Take care, stay awesome, and I'll see you next time on WHAM Today.